Switzerland is usually sold to the world as a postcard country, a place of quiet villages, clean trains, chocolate shops, and polite neutrality. It looks calm, almost fragile, like a nation that survives because nobody wants to bother it. But that image only works if you never look beneath the surface. Because hidden behind barns, carved into cliffs, buried under highways, and sealed behind anonymous steel doors is a country that has spent more than a century preparing for the worst. Switzerland isn't peaceful because it's gentle. Switzerland is peaceful because it made itself too expensive to attack. To understand this, you have to start with geography. Switzerland sits at the center of Europe, surrounded by major powers, with no ocean, no buffer states, and no easy escape routes. Historically, this made it vulnerable. So instead of trying to project power outward, Switzerland did the opposite. It turned inward and hardened itself. Every mountain became a wall. Every valley became a choke point. Every road became a potential trap. The Alps weren't just scenery. They were the backbone of a national defense philosophy that assumed invasion was not just possible, but inevitable. During World War II, this thinking crystallized into what became known as the National Redoubt. Swiss military planners knew they couldn't defend their cities forever against a major power. Zurich, Geneva, and Basel were exposed. Instead of dying in the lowlands, the plan was to abandon them. The army would withdraw deep into the Alps, sealing off tunnels, destroying bridges, and turning mountain passes into killing zones. The enemy could occupy Swiss cities, but they would never control the country. The heart of Switzerland would disappear into stone. What made the National Redoubt terrifying wasn't just the idea, but the execution. Entire mountains were hollowed out. Artillery was hidden behind rock faces that could slide open, fire, and close again without leaving a trace. Barracks, hospitals, command centers, and supply depots were buried so deeply that even sustained bombing couldn't reach them. These weren't temporary shelters. They were underground cities designed to operate independently for months. Soldiers trained to live in them. Supplies were stockpiled, air systems were sealed and filtered. Switzerland prepared not just to survive an invasion, but to outlast it. After the war, most countries dismantled their emergency defenses. Switzerland doubled down. During the Cold War, the fear shifted from tanks to nuclear weapons. But the response was the same: hide, harden, and prepare. While other nations debated civil defense, Switzerland quietly mandated it. Laws were passed requiring fallout shelters in residential buildings. Over time, this produced something unprecedented. Switzerland became the only country on Earth with enough nuclear shelters for more than 100% of its population. Not a plan, not a proposal, actual built shelters. These shelters aren't symbolic, they're inspected, they're maintained. Many are hidden behind ordinary doors in apartment basements, schools, and office buildings. Some are massive public complexes capable of housing thousands. Thick blast doors, air filtration systems, water storage, and sleeping quarters are standard. In Switzerland, civil defense isn't a suggestion, it's infrastructure. If nuclear sirens were to sound tomorrow, every resident would be expected to know where to go, because there is a place for everyone. Then there is the rigging. For decades, Switzerland quietly wired itself for demolition. Bridges, tunnels, highways, and mountain roads were prepared with pre-installed explosive chambers. Not rumors, not contingency plans, actual engineering. In the event of invasion, Swiss forces could collapse key routes within minutes, isolating enemy units and turning modern armored columns into trapped targets. At its peak, over 3,000 pieces of infrastructure were prepared this way. An invading army wouldn't just face defenders, it would face a landscape actively destroying itself beneath them. What made this even more effective was discretion. Many of these installations were invisible to civilians, let alone foreign intelligence. A peaceful mountain road could become impassable in seconds. A tunnel could vanish. A bridge could drop into a ravine. The message was clear: even if you cross the border, you will not move freely. Switzerland weaponized terrain in a way few nations ever have. For a time after the Cold War, it seemed like this era was over. Bunkers were decommissioned, some were sold, a few were converted into data centers, hotels, or cheese storage. The world felt safer, neutrality felt sufficient again. But history has a way of returning. When war came back to Europe with the invasion of Ukraine, Switzerland quietly changed course. In late 2023, the government halted the sale of military bunkers. Facilities once considered obsolete were suddenly valuable again. By 2025, the language shifted further. Swiss defense officials began speaking openly about reintegration, not rebuilding from scratch, but reactivating what already existed, updating systems, restoring readiness, reconnecting fortifications into modern defense planning. The logic was simple and deeply Swiss. If you already have the fortress, why dismantle it? Especially when the world is reminding you that peace is not permanent. What makes Switzerland unique isn't aggression, it's refusal. The country has structured itself around the idea that war should never be easy for anyone who brings it to their borders. Neutrality in this context isn't passive, it's armed restraint. Switzerland doesn't threaten, it doesn't expand, but it ensures that any violation would come at an unbearable cost. This philosophy extends beyond bunkers and bridges into the culture itself. Military service is mandatory, weapons training is normalized. The army is built around rapid mobilization rather than permanent deployment. Soldiers keep equipment ready. Infrastructure is designed with dual use in mind. Airports double as runways for fighter jets. Highways can become airstrips. Civilian systems are quietly compatible with military needs. Nothing looks like a fortress, and that's the point. Even the landscape lies. That quiet farmhouse might hide a reinforced concrete bunker behind its wooden exterior. That rock wall might conceal artillery ports sealed behind stone panels. Switzerland mastered camouflage not just in appearance, but in identity. It looks harmless because it wants to. The surprise is part of the defense. The psychological effect of this matters. Deterrence isn't only about weapons, it's about uncertainty. An invader planning an operation against Switzerland would have to assume that nothing is what it seems. Every route could be trapped, every valley could be defended, every delay could be fatal. The cost-benefit analysis quickly collapses. And so Switzerland remains untouched, not by accident, but by calculation. What's striking is how little this is discussed openly. Swiss citizens grow up aware of shelters and service, but rarely frame it as militarism. It's civic duty, preparedness, insurance. Just like saving money or buying health coverage, defense is treated as a responsibility rather than an obsession. This normalization is what allows such extensive systems to exist without public panic or political chaos. In a world increasingly shocked by instability, Switzerland's approach feels almost anachronistic, yet strangely modern. It didn't outsource its security. It didn't rely on alliances alone. It built redundancy, depth, and resilience into the ground itself. And when conditions changed, it didn't scramble. It simply reopened doors that were already there. Switzerland is not a fortress in the way medieval castles were fortresses. It doesn't loom, it doesn't threaten. It waits, it absorbs, it denies. The mountains aren't just barriers, they're storage, protection, and memory. They remember wars that never reached Swiss cities because planners decided long ago that survival meant preparation, not optimism. In 2025, as bunkers are quietly brought back into doctrine and infrastructure is re-evaluated through the lens of conflict, the myth of Switzerland as merely peaceful becomes harder to sustain. Peace here is engineered, it's layered, it's enforced by the knowledge that behind every quiet road and scenic tunnel is a country that planned for the day everything went wrong. What makes Switzerland truly unsettling to military planners isn't just the number of bunkers or the terrain, but the mindset baked into Swiss society itself. Defense here is not something outsourced to a standing army alone. It's culturally distributed. For generations, Swiss citizens were raised with the assumption that war might come, that neutrality does not guarantee safety, and that survival depends on preparation rather than optimism. This philosophy shaped everything from urban planning to education, creating a population that views defense infrastructure not as paranoia, but as civic responsibility. Even as other nations dismantled Cold War systems in the 1990s, Switzerland quietly mothballed theirs, preserving them in a state of reversible readiness rather than permanent abandonment. During the Cold War, Switzerland understood a brutal truth that many countries preferred to ignore. In a nuclear exchange, cities are liabilities. The Swiss National Redoubt doctrine was therefore not only about hiding in mountains, but about denying an enemy the satisfaction of a decisive strike. By decentralizing command centers, logistics, food reserves, and communications into hardened alpine locations, Switzerland ensured that even if its cities were destroyed, the state itself would survive. This meant that invasion plans targeting Zurich, Geneva, or Bern were strategically meaningless unless the attacker was prepared to fight a prolonged, grinding mountain war against an enemy that never fully reveals itself. The Alps themselves were transformed into a weapon system. Entire cliff faces were hollowed out to house artillery batteries capable of sealing valleys with interlocking fire. These were not symbolic defenses, they were mathematically calculated kill zones designed to trap mechanized forces in narrow corridors where air support would be limited and armor would be nearly useless. Some of these fortresses remained classified well into the 21st century, their existence denied even as tourists skied past disguised blast doors embedded into rock walls. The silence surrounding them was intentional, because deterrence works best when the enemy knows enough to be afraid, but not enough to plan around it. The psychological impact of this strategy cannot be overstated. Invading Switzerland would never be a quick operation, never a clean victory, and never politically painless. Every tunnel could collapse behind you, every mountain pass could become a choke point, and every civilian structure might conceal hardened infrastructure beneath it. This uncertainty is itself a defensive layer. It just pauses. Switzerland doesn't advertise this. It doesn't need to. The fortress works best when you only realize it exists after it's too late. And that may be the most Swiss strategy of all. Build something unbreakable, then pretend it isn't there at all.